Energy prices are soaring. For many people, their energy bills has actually become higher than their rent. But what can we do to reduce those bills? How can we keep our energy expenses under control? It's to answer these questions that we've organized a meetup with the FIRE Belgium community. In this replay of the event, Oris, a member of the FIRE Belgium community and someone who works in the energy markets in Belgium, tells us how the Belgian energy markets work and how to get better prices and the best energy deals. He also tells us what we should be paying attention to if we have solar panels, or if we plan on installing solar panels, and also the differences between different kinds of meters and how that impacts your bill. All right, let's go.
So, how to save money in the Belgian energy market. Right, so first off, who's this for? The reason I put this slide in is because everything I talk about, everything we do at the company that I work for in the energy market is for the left column that you see here, for the small businesses and or consumers, meaning an electricity consumption of less than 50,000 kilowatt hours and a gas consumption of less or equal to 100 kilowatt hours. If you go over those limits, you're basically what is called an enterprise, and different principles apply to you. I'm guessing that nobody here will meet those standards. But basically, the contract structure is a bit different. That's pretty much all you need to know. Everything I say here will be most relevant to consumers and or small businesses. If you do have a large business and you'd like to talk about this, then send me a message after the session or in some other way, and I'll be happy to connect you to the right people that will help you with this particular problem. TLDR is the basic principles are the same, but because you're an enterprise and you have this high level of consumption, the contracts work a bit different. Okay, so this is what we're actually going to talk about. Another group that is excluded from this talk is the people who have social tariff. What is social tariff? Is basically a custom lower rate that the government is basically giving to a limited amount of people because they have problems with income or with disability or whatever. Social tariff is universal across Belgium and is the lowest tariff on the market. If you go to a supplier and ask them for discounts or whatever, they will not be able to give it to you because you already have the lowest tariff on the market. So nothing I say here will be relevant to you. It might be interesting, you might learn a lot, but you will not be able to benefit any of the promotions or anything else that the large energy suppliers will be offering you. So keep that in mind. If this applies to you, then you can basically zone out because you can't save any money with anything that I'm trying to teach here. First thing, before I can actually explain how this all works, is I need to explain to you who is in the market, who are the players. I think I'm missing a slide here, but anyway, I have to explain to you who the players are in the market just because it allows you to better understand who does what and why this market works the way it does. It's a pretty important part, and that's why I like to cover this in a bit more detail. So the first group is the energy producers, which we all know. But this group is not as big and as varied as you think it would be. So for electricity, specifically, we have the main producer of electricity, which is ENGIE. Those are the people that operate the nuclear power plants in Belgium. They basically have a mandate from the Belgian government, if I'm not mistaken, to operate all those plants. I think we have 4 or 5 of them. And they complement their ensemble, if you want to call it that, with wind energy and probably a couple others as well. And then the biggest other producers that we have is Luminous and Eneco. Luminous mainly has coal and gas plants and also some wind energy, and Eneco has mainly wind energy. And then there's a couple of smaller ones that have a limited amount of wind energy that they produce themselves, but this is like less than 2% of the full production that we have in Belgium. It's not anything to speak of. So the main bulk of the energy production, I'm not sure what the exact percentage is, but let's say between 80 and 90%, if not 95% of all the energy is produced by the upper 3 that you see here, ENGIE, Luminous, and Eneco. And then we have a different group, which is the net distributors. The net distributors are basically the people that run the cables from the electricity power plants, the stations where they produce the electricity, to your home. This includes both gas and electricity. The net distributors, who they are, it kind of depends on where you are. So you have a whole bunch of them. In Flanders, you have Fluvius on the top left here of your screen. In Wallonia and in Brussels, you have a bunch of others. There's no real reasonable way in how this is divided. I'm not really sure how they did it. Basically, I think the area around Liège, if I remember right, is Reza. People in Hainaut, Henegouwen, and Luxembourg have Oris. I'm not sure how this all works anyway. The point is, every region, every postal code, every city or community has one net distributor, which is responsible for the electricity and gas network. Basically, whenever there's a problem with a network, when you're disconnected, or when, for instance, if you live in a new area where new houses get built and you want a gas connection, for instance, my house, the street where I live, there used to be electricity, but there did not used to be gas on my side of the street. So I had to call Fluvius, and they had to basically come in, dig the new pipes under my street so I can get a gas connection at my house. That's what these people do. That's what these people that's what their job is. Basically, they are responsible for the distribution of the electricity and gas to all the residences in Belgium. Fluvius, a small side note here for the Flemish people, Fluvius is actually a group of, I think, about a dozen smaller net distributors. They still operate individually, but they approach the customer collectively under the name Fluvius, which is really weird, because they all have different tariffs. A portion of the we'll cover this later, but a portion of the money that you spend when you pay for your electricity is actually given to the net distributors to do what they do, to operate. And every sub distributor in Flanders who is part of Fluvius has a different rate. So people in West Flanders have a different rate than in Antwerp or Limburg, which is bonkers to me, but that's the way it works anyway. And then the next group is the energy suppliers. You'll see a bunch of familiar names coming back here. Hold on, I'm going to switch here because I think I have the wrong slides. This is the presentation I did for the last time I did.
It says 2020, yes.
Yeah, exactly. So I knew there was something I was missing, but it's so similar that I didn't notice immediately. All right, apologies for that. Shows you how professional I am. Going back to the production really quick, I covered most of it, but I just want to cover a small percentage more. The electricity production here that we have in Belgium more or less covers the consumption. So as you can see, back in the beginning of the aughts, I think is what it's called, 2025 and so forth, we had to import electricity. Basically, we were consuming more than we were actually using. Right now, we have upped the ante, and now we're actually producing a bit more than we are using. I think 2020 is not covered here in the statistics that I found. If we were to see 2020, my guess would be that we are actually going way down, and we're currently actually producing energy for France, which is another reason why our electricity bills are currently so high. But I don't have this for a fact, obviously, because I couldn't find it online. Electricity production, as you can tell right here, most of it is nuclear. That is NG that we talked about earlier. The rest is mostly gas. We have a bit hydro, a bit of solar. In total, our energy production is about 20% reusable. So solar and wind and other renewable energy sources. And this basically gives you an idea of what our production is made of in Belgium. Gas production is basically zero. The gas production all comes from abroad, and you can see here a whole bunch of different countries. This is from 2020, so not the most up-to-date I think United Kingdom was part of the EU back then, so I'm not sure how much that has changed. The Netherlands also is a lot less because they've limited the amount of gas that they actually pump up, and Russia, obviously, for well-known reasons, I think, is also a bit different. So I'm not sure exactly where our gas comes from, but the big point here is we don't have any gas ourselves. We have to import it from our neighboring countries, and that's where we get our resources. In terms of consumption, how do we use it? The majority is for the distribution network, which is consumers and small businesses. There's a bit for electricity production, 20%. 22% of the gas imported is actually used for the 30% of electricity that we saw in the earlier graph. And 24% or roughly 25% is used for the big industry, so the big factories and such. So this was the slide I was missing. That's where my coin started to drop, so to speak. So who's in the game? And we covered all of this. We know all of them. So skip this real quickly. Slide is more or less the same. There's a couple different names here. Ascent is no longer here. We have Total Energies instead of Octaplus. Anyway, TLDR is the same. So what does a supplier do? As you can see in this slide, we have a lot more names than we had earlier in the production slide. So what is it that the supplier actually does? Again, these are the only, or let's say the major energy producers in Belgium. So what do all the other ones do? Well, we know it's not the management of the infrastructure because that's what the net distributors do. So the question remains, what is it actually that the suppliers are actually charging us money for? Well, basically, it's absolutely nothing except sending invoices. That is exactly what a net distributor is doing. A net distributor, a energy supplier is nothing more than an invoice billing factory. We can see this very clearly when we start to follow the money flow. So we have the biggest producers in Belgium, and the energy suppliers among each other basically buy and sell energy to each other. So Mega, for instance, has no production capability itself. So basically they buy all their electricity from the producers in Belgium. The big producers also trade amongst themselves. For instance, if Engie produces electricity for 5 million people, but they only have 2 million customers, well, they sell their energy to, for instance, Luminous, Ineco, and all the other ones. I'm not sure how the distribution is made currently between everyone, so I don't know exactly how much customers Engie has and so forth. But the point is they all trade energy amongst each other. And that money, obviously, that they pay to the producers is then recovered from the clients, meaning from us. So that means consumers, small industries, large industries, everybody basically who uses electricity pays the suppliers for their product, so to speak. A part of the money, as I just discussed a couple slides ago, goes to the net distributors who use that money to do their activities, basically laying the pipes, changing the meters that they're currently doing all the necessary stuff to make sure that we have a continued supply of gas and electricity. And all of the parties involved basically spend money or pay money to the government in form of taxes, fees, excises, and everything. A whole different types of revenue streams go to the government, basically. So basically what you see here is that the suppliers are middlemen. Don't know if anyone ever seen the movie, highly recommended. Don't allow kids to sit next to you when you do. But that is what an energy supplier actually does. And it's important to realize that because the power that they supply is not their own. It's not something that they have. It's not a tangible good that they sell. It's not something that's on the shelf. Meaning that if you switch between these suppliers, all that changes actually is a line in a spreadsheet that says this is now our customer or this is now not our customer. That is all that changes, which means that it is incredibly easy to switch energy suppliers because nothing will change for you except the company that sends you a bill at the end of the month. That is the big takeaway from this section of the presentation. Now, the prices that we actually pay, how do they come about? This is the interesting part of the conversation. The graphs that you see here in front of you are not representative of the current situation. These are from, I think, June last year, but it's not. It covers the point I'm trying to make here. We can see that the total price that we get charged by a supplier consists of four major components. We have the green, which is VAT or BTW, which here is marked at 17%. Currently, it's at 6%. We have the red part, which is taxes, all types of different taxes, federal, local, a whole bunch of them. For solar, this is even worse. Then we have the net costs, and the blue, the dark blue, which is what is charged or passed along to the net distributors, I should say. And then we have the greenish, I hope it comes through on your side as well, as greenish, which is the actual cost of the energy itself. So you can see this is a complicated mix of various elements. Now, the interesting thing that you have to realize here is that 3 of the 4 components are identical for all suppliers. Every supplier that you sign a contract with, no matter the product that they charge, this part is exactly the same. The only thing that is different, the only thing that is unique for a supplier and that differentiates 2 different products from each other is the green part, which is the actual cost of the energy that they charge us as clients. And we can see that these prices over the past 8 years haven't really changed all that much. This is a graph. The upper graph is the different electricity costs that we have. The lower, the blue one, is the gas rates. And then we can see there's not a lot of change here. And this is true for pretty much all products for all suppliers across the entire country. Most of these suppliers charge roughly the same price. There's a couple not even cents, like tenths of cents difference every now and again. And sometimes one supplier might do something radical to go like maybe 2 cents below the market price and stuff like that if they want to do something really special. But in general, should I say, the prices are more or less the same, and the prices are more or less stable. And then this happened. So this is the graph extended up to today, actually, up to the latest price changes that we've seen. You can see, I'm not sure if you can see my mouse. I don't think I can see it here. I'm not sure if you can see it either. The prices went up a little bit at the beginning of 2020, which is COVID coming back. So when we all started to go back to work, demand went up. So obviously the prices also go up. That's the way the free market works. But the biggest shift is clear to see, which is around April, which is when the conflict in Ukraine happened. And then we see like a really big change in our prices, both gas and electricity, which is affecting us to this very day. So how do you choose a supplier if we know that, number one, they don't sell their own products, they do not keep stock, there's no difference in networks, and there's virtually no difference in the prices between the various suppliers. So how, based on what, do we actually determine which supplier is the best for us? Well, actually, it's based on promotions. So basically, the prices vary very little or change very little. The promotions, they change a lot. Basically, every month, at the beginning of every month, every supplier chooses a couple of new promotions that they make available to the public. Let's say they have 5 different products. For every product, for both the residential market as the professional market, they choose a couple new promotions to go with those. They send those to the market, send those to all the participants, the comparison engines and so forth. And those are basically the differentiating factors between the different suppliers. Which promotions they give totally depends on their mood or the amount of customers that has joined or left in the previous months. So these change every month, at the beginning of every month. Sometimes they change even in the middle of the month whenever they see something they like or whenever they see a promotion is not really going their way or whatever. Typically, though, only once at the beginning of every month. Now, these promotions, how should I put this? It makes, because it's so complicated, because these promotions are very difficult to understand, it makes sense to compare. But before you can compare between the various suppliers, you have to understand how this market actually works. There are two different or big things that you have to take into account. Number one being the contracts that you sign with any energy supplier in Belgium are renewed automatically. So basically, I'm not sure how you say this in French. In Dutch, it is stilzwijgend verlengd. So basically, when you don't say anything, the supplier basically assumes that the contract keeps going the way that it was before, and it automatically renews or resumes the contract, continues the contract as was stated earlier. The second big thing is that the promotions that these suppliers offer are only valid for the first year, for the first 12 months after your contract has started. Start date is very important. If you sign a contract, for instance, in March, and you ask your supplier to start that contract in July, in July is when your promotions will start until and including June of next year. So that is a big thing. Now, those two combined will actually determine how you should switch and when you should switch energy suppliers. In order to illustrate the point, I'm going to give you a very concrete pricing example, right? In this example, I'm going to use a price for Mega. Now, the prices that you'll see in this presentation are also from December 2020, so the prices will not be current, but the basic principle will be the same. So it should not detract from anything I'm saying at this point. Just keep in mind that, you will not currently be able to have your utilities at this rate. It also makes no difference for a supplier. Mega is just the example that I had on hand when I made these slides. Pretty much every different supplier works in exactly the same way. Okay, the exact promotions, specific promotions that we're talking about might differ, but the basic principle is the same. So what are we going to compare? We're going to compare a gas and electricity situation with a normal meter, meaning there's only one rate that we're actually going to be comparing, and a electricity consumption of 4,500 kilowatt hours on a simple meter, so a normal meter, and a gas consumption of 23,500 kilowatt hours. Okay. So the prices for December 2020 was 5 cents and some change for electricity, and 1 cent, 1 cent and a half for gas. Okay, if we calculate the total cost, then it all boils down to 243 euros for electricity, give or take, and 331 for gas. That's the energy cost itself. So that's only the green part that we had earlier in the graph when I showed you difference between the different points of the what the electricity prices are made of. The other costs, meaning the taxes and everything else, that boils down to 822 for electricity and 675 for gas. But as I said earlier, those are identical for the entire, for every different type of product that you have in the market. So those don't actually vary. So that means the total cost is 1,066 for electricity and 774 for gas. Totals 1,840 euros, give or take, for 1 year of electricity and gas for this particular situation. Now, the promotion, the first year promotion, let's say, for instance, they give you an arbitrary amount, meaning a fixed amount of 165 euros for electricity and 205 euros for gas. So a total of 370 euros of promotions that you receive from your supplier. That's good, right? So that changes the pricing a bit. Electricity goes down to 901 and gas goes down to 569, I'm sorry, totaling 1,470 euros instead of the 1,840 that we had earlier, which is great. So that's what you'll be paying for electricity in the first year. Going back to what I talked about earlier, the first year. Remember, contracts are renewed automatically and promotions are only valid for the first 12 months, meaning after the first year, when we pay 1,470 without doing anything, without any changes, without any updates, without any notification at all from any of the suppliers in Belgium, the second year, you pay the full amount, 1,840 euros, without any discounts. The reason they do this is because they want to lure you in, right? So basically the system in Belgium, it works on the assumption that you as a consumer are too lazy and too stupid to check the prices regularly and to read the contract carefully. They basically count on you not being active enough to follow up on what it is that is going on. They count on luring you in with a cheap price, which it is a good price, and then hoping that you are content enough to settle, to not investigate further and stick it out. Mega in particular is very guilty of this. I'm going to rant a little bit on these guys because they have been known to do some very bad business practices in general. They are very known for aggressively marketing to new customers and then leaving them out to dry. If you want more specifics on what they do, I suggest that you look at your local newspaper. There have been many complaints with Mega at government instances, and newspapers alike on the bad practices that they do. It's basically part of their marketing strategy. I'm not going to go in any further in this. What they do is not illegal, right? The principles that they apply here are used across the board by all suppliers. Mega is just a bit more aggressive in these principles and just is being an overall dick, basically, to pull extra amounts of money for you and make it extra difficult for you to actually work with them in an easy and nice way. So really bad customer experience is what I guess I'm saying. Basically, based on what we just learned, the solution is pretty clear. Because the promotions that you get only apply to new customers, meaning customers that were not customer before, it basically means you have to switch once per year between energy suppliers. That means that every year when your new contract starts, you will be a new customer to an energy supplier, and you will benefit the same promotions as someone who has built a new house and is connecting to the energy grid for the first time. It doesn't matter if you switch back and forth between two suppliers, so you can switch between Mega and Luminous for the rest of your life. That works perfectly fine. Every time you switch, you will enjoy 12 months of promotions and discounts at your new supplier. Okay. It's not recommended to switch between two suppliers. It might be that is the right thing for you to do, but before you do, it is important to always compare which energy supplier is the best for you, right? So every situation, every month, the promotions will be different. So it might be that you never will be able to switch with Eneco because the promotion doesn't work for you for your particular situation. That is perfectly fine. The important thing is that you switch every year, every 12 months, so you have the benefit of those promotions. There's one other thing I wanted to say here, but it doesn't, right, okay, I got it again. Switching different products at the same supplier does not count. So for instance, you cannot switch from a Luminous Optimal to a Luminous Flex. That will not count you as a new supplier, as a new client. Then you will be an existing client for Luminous, which warrants you 0 promotions at all. Some energy suppliers I know, if you call them and ask for a discount, some will give this to you. But generally, that'll be a much smaller discount that you will get if you were a new customer. Okay. So how do you find the new supplier that you wanna switch to? Well, that is a very good question. All of these promotions, all these tariffs are very complicated to calculate, and it would take you hours to do it yourself. So luckily, there are plenty of options for you on the market, on the internet, that will make it very easy for you to do all of those calculations with one touch of a button. Well, not one, but let's say 20, which is fairly reasonable, I think. These are the most well-known that I could find. The upper 4 are actually what's called comparison engines. These are companies that basically get paid by the energy suppliers to send clients their way. It's basically a form of affiliate marketing, right? The fees that these companies give these comparison engines are the same across the board. So Mega will give the same fee as Luminous, will give the same fee as Engie, and so forth. These fees are predetermined by the regulators, which are the three that you see on the bottom here, and cannot be changed. So it makes no sense for any of these companies to push any particular supplier to you at any given point. They will get paid the same amount no matter who you switch to. They are also checked upon by these regulators, these government instances, to make sure that all the prices that are on these platforms are correct. And if they don't abide by the rules, they will be severely punished, and they will not be allowed to operate in Belgium. So you can count on the fact that all of these comparison engines are totally independent. They try to give you the best service, the most clear understanding of what is going on, and they are not incentivized in any way to deceive you in any way possible. It may occur that some companies, some energy suppliers have different promotions on different platforms. It doesn't happen very often in my experience. It happens a lot more often when you are in telecom, for instance, because the partnerships are different there. In energy, however, it doesn't. Usually, there are no differences in who can provide which promotions. Sometimes one of these companies will refuse to carry one of the suppliers. For instance, it may be that Mega is not available on Mijn Energie, or that Engie is not available on energievergelijker.be. That just means that there was no contract between those two companies, and it's not that you can't switch to that company. It just means that this calculation engine will not help you to switch to that energy supplier. That's the way you have to look at it. These are the four major ones that I found. There could be more, but I'm not aware of them at that point. So yeah, these are the four comparison engines. The regulators that you see on the bottom, which are grayed out at this point, they basically monitor the market. They monitor both these comparison engines as well as the energy suppliers, and they basically, theoretically anyway, defend the rights of the consumer and make sure everything is above board, is the way it's supposed to work. Now, my preference here is the aanbieders.be or webfournisseur.be, depending on what region you're from. I think, from what I have seen, I think I like what they do the best. Now, full disclaimer here, because I have to be honest, I work for them, but I work for them in a freelance capacity, meaning I am not affiliated with the company itself. I don't have stock in a company. I don't have a markup on everything on anything they make. If they do 100 sales, I get paid the same amount, even if they make 2 sales. And I will not be providing any affiliate codes or whatever in this presentation. So anything anything I say here is based on my opinion. It doesn't incentivize me in any way to tell you that they are better than the rest or in any way, shape, or form. It's just my preference based on what I know about the market. Okay. If you have any questions on that specifically, feel free to talk to me after the presentation. I'm not going to do any marketing here any more than that. I just felt I had to give this information to you so you understand what my position is. Anyway, the TLDR is, coming back to what I talked about earlier, switch once per year. It doesn't really matter which comparison engine that you use. And even if you make it really easy on yourself and switch between 2 suppliers every year, so I know, for example, Mega Luminous, Mega Luminous, Mega Luminous, to make it easy on yourself, that is possible. It just might mean that you miss out on a couple of promotions that are very specific to you, and you might be better off, I should say, with a better situation. The only thing I will say, if I can say one thing on why I think aanbieders is better. With aanbieders, they will actually help you remember to switch every year, whereas the other ones, they basically count on you remembering that you have to switch every year. Is the basic, one of the biggest difference that I have. And for everything else, talk to me after the presentation if you're interested in that sort of thing. Now, what about group purchases? These used to be a thing. I'm not really sure what the situation is now. I haven't seen a lot of them lately. What happens in a group purchase is basically one company, like iChooser or Samestacker. Those are just the two major ones I found. What happens is they approach 2 or 3 energy suppliers and basically sign a contract with them. So for instance, let's say iChooser goes to Engie and they sign a deal that if they provide Engie with 20,000 families, for instance, for argument's sake, Engie will give them a promotion of, say, 250 euros per household. They also try to make a deal with Luminous, and Luminous says if you provide us with 30,000 families, we'll give you a deal of 400 euros discount per family. And that's all good and dandy, and they try to do their best. They try to negotiate the best contract for you. So you have the best deal. The problem with that is the deal that is given by the energy supplier might not necessarily be the right deal for you. For example, let's say they give a discount on the kilowatt hour usage of your electricity meter. That's good. If you have a very low consumption because you have solar panels, that promotion might mean almost nothing to you. Whereas your neighbor who doesn't have solar panels, who has a very high electricity usage, might benefit greatly from that same promotion. Usually these group purchase, they don't look at your personal specific situation that you're in. And in that case, it might be the case that you are given a promotion, a valid promotion, but because of your specific situation, the actual usage that you have, the gas usage, the meter type or whatever, it makes little or no difference to you, and you would have been better off with a different promotion at a different consumer outside of the group purchase. So in that sense, because the energy market is so situation specific, it's so difficult to compare between suppliers or between situations, between families even, and it makes much more sense to look at your individual situation rather than a group purchase, in my opinion. Now, the most common mistakes I see here is people switch too early. In some cases, this may mean that you don't get your full promotions. For instance, Engie, if you switch after 10 months instead of after 12, they give you 10/12ths of the promotion that you were initially given. If you do this at Mega, they give you 0 promotions. This is one of the examples that I was talking about earlier where they basically act like a dick. Sorry, there's really no other way I can put this. Do not accept offers from people knocking on your door. Please do not do this. They are not incentivized to give you an objective opinion at all. I think there's even laws against doing this at this point. I'm not really sure, but whatever you do, if they come knocking on your door, please tell them to go away and stop doing what they're doing, because these people are not trying to help you. And if you have solar panels, switch the right month. I will talk a lot more on that later because it is very complicated. I'm very sorry. But the most common mistake that I see is to fill out the forms with global data or random guesses. As I said earlier, your specific situation is very important. This includes meter type, whether or not you have solar panels, your exact consumption. All of these things greatly factor into which promotions actually apply to you and what the effect would be of that particular promotion. Your prices can differ significantly based on your personal situation. So don't just switch to a particular product because your neighbor says it's good. Make the calculation yourself with as accurate an estimation as possible, because it will save you a lot of money in the long run. Now let's zoom in on recent events. We earlier saw this particular slide, and it is true, the energy situation currently in Belgium and across the world actually is completely bonkers. And the main reason is this. If anyone has a direct line to Putin and knows how to convince this guy to stop being an asshole, basically, please do, because this is literally what is driving the prices up. The reason for that is really simple. Going back to this slide that we talked about earlier, 30% of all our electricity is produced using gas and or coal, but that is a huge amount. And because the prices of gas go up exponentially, electricity also goes up. And naturally, our gas is important. Gas price go up, so it makes sense that that price is higher right now. So as long as this war is going on, as long as Russia is basically making it a lot more difficult for us to have access to cheap gas, this is going to keep happening, and this is not going to be going away anytime soon. I'm sure pretty much everyone is following the news. It doesn't look like peace is going to be around the corner, especially with the winter. So most likely, we're going to be in this type of situation for the next year or so, maybe even longer. So be prepared. I cannot change this. You have to understand that the energy suppliers are also not happy about this at all. They're currently bleeding money, same as we are, just because the situation is so fucked up. So it's not that they are trying to get you, trying to get money out of your pocket. It's just the situation is just incredibly difficult at this point. And the consequences of what is happening is that the fixed tariff rates have disappeared just because the market is so volatile and changing so quickly. Fixed rates are no longer offered by pretty much any energy supplier at all. All the prices that you currently see on the market are variable, meaning that they will follow the market. This basically means that you basically will be charged a different price every month for your contract. And I think your advances will also change every quarter, depending on how the market is going up. So if the prices go down, we saw, I think on the slide here, prices actually went down this month. So your advance will also go down a bit if the trend keeps holding, and you will also be charged a little bit less. Second big thing is there are no more promotions. Since August, there are basically zero actual big promotions being handed out by suppliers. The only promotions that we currently see in the market are basically like 10 or 15 euros if you pay with direct debit, domiciliering in Netherlands. Those are pretty much the only one out there. Because the suppliers are so afraid of what is going to happen. If they pull in a huge amount of clients with a pretty big promotion at this point and the prices go through the roof, they will basically go bankrupt. And we already have a couple of bankruptcies in Belgium. So that is why most suppliers do not offer any promotions at this point because of that market situation. So basically, pricing example from earlier, where we used to have a relatively cheap first year and then a normal price next year, prices are basically the same. It doesn't change. Well, obviously they follow the market, right? So it's not going to be exactly that amount. If prices go up, you have to pay a bit more. Prices go down, you have to pay a bit less. The principle applies. You will pay more or less the same in the first year than you would in the second year, sadly enough. That does not mean that you should not compare. Promotions could come out every month, right? We don't know what is going to happen if prices continue to go down as they have been doing this month. Some suppliers might even try to do a new promotion. It is worth noting, though, that sometimes it might be possible or might be advisable to wait a bit longer. It just depends on your situation. I would highly recommend to switch or to compare, sorry, at around the 10th of every month, because give the comparison engines a bit of time to update their pricing and everything, to see if it might not be relevant for you to switch to a new supplier if your contract is approaching the 12-month limit, or if you're already over the 12-month limit, because you never know what actually might change. We don't know until 2 or 3 days before the month actually ends what the new promotions are going to be for the new month. So it's even hard for us to actually to guess even what is going to happen. We have no idea. Now, in terms of comparing. A bit earlier, we talked about comparison engines and regulators, in stating that the regulators basically monitor the market and they don't do any comparisons. Well, that used to be true and is still true for the most part. But recently we have a new thing called the FIRE V-test. The FIRE is a regulator in Flanders, and basically they've taken it upon themselves to make a new comparison engine, of their own, called the V-test. Basically, they do exactly the same as what our product, our comparison engine does, and they do it fairly well. The results are pretty much the same, and they give you a clear overview of what the cheapest price in the market is. The only difference between them and us is they don't get paid. They don't get paid. They don't get a commission from the energy suppliers. So basically, they just give you, this is the price, and then it's up to you to decide to switch to a different supplier whenever you think this is the right thing to do. The only thing that is a bit unfair about this, if I do may say so myself, is they built this engine with taxpayer money. They get funded by the government, so funded by us, by our taxes. Whereas we, as companies, we have to finance everything we do with sales. So it's a bit of an unfair advantage because their budget is basically unlimited, whereas ours is very limited on the amount of sales that we have. You know, in order to promote this product, they basically had 2 million euros worth of AdSense or Google Ads revenue that they can just throw at it. Those are numbers that we can only dream of. But again, the product itself does work and does give you an accurate view of what the market actually is doing. So can't really say anything about that. Now, it is worth noting what they say on their website. They mention on their website that there is a big difference in price between what they say and what we say. And this is true, but there's also a reason for that. And this is also one of the things that is most confusing about the Belgian energy market at this point, especially in Flanders, when you have to make sense of you know, what is in front of you. Basically, to make a long story short, there used to be a charter that the KREG, which is the national regulator, forced all the energy suppliers to sign, which specifies the calculation method that they have to use to calculate their prices. I'm not going to go too much into detail. This is the formula if you're ever curious. Basically, they used an index, which is historical data over the past, I don't know, 10 or 15 years or whatever. Turn that into an algorithm multiplied by a factor of margin and VAT something to end up at a cost per kilowatt hour price, which is what they use on their sheets, which is basically a way of estimating, of guessing what is going to happen next year, right? Because basically we're setting prices now that we hope will cover our expenses in the next 12 months. That is basically what they're doing. Now, what the VREG says is that this method is inaccurate. They basically they say the Flemish regulator is contradicting the federal regulator in stating that the method here is too inaccurate to provide a correct estimation of what the prices are going to be within 12 months. And they basically said, we are going to create a very new method to use on our website, and we are going to scream at pretty much everyone that wants to hear it, how everybody else is wrong. Now, to be fair to the VREG, their calculation method might well be right. We don't know what is going to happen within 12 months. Nobody guessed what the war in Ukraine would actually do to our prices. Nobody knew Russia was going to attack, or, well, knew last year, to put it that way. So who is right? I'm not going to argue that point. I'm not going to have an opinion on that. The point is, the VREG keeps yelling at everybody, keeps yelling at us that we are doing it incorrectly. They are confusing consumers because everybody is scrambling to understand who, you know, this calculation method gives me a price of 10,000 euro. The other one gives me a price of 5,000 euro. Who is right? What is going on? This is very confusing for consumers, understandably so. Basically, we don't know. Right? It's just a different way to calculate what is going to happen, what the prices are going to look like within the next calendar year. They might both be wrong, or either one or the other is right. It's very hard to estimate at this point, and all you have to understand is it's just another approach to the same problem. Whatever it is you see on the results page of either the VREG or Mijn Energie or energie.be or aanbieders.be, it doesn't really matter. The point is, it's a guess based on rough data that we have. At this point, We don't know how to verify the VREG calculation because they refuse to share any information of their calculation method with us. So we don't know how good it is, and we can't estimate anything other than it is there. It is different from the current calculation method that we have, and we don't know quite how it's going to end up, okay? This is very confusing, and I'm very sorry, but this is the reality that we deal with. So nobody knows for sure. Just remember that it is a tool, and we can't change the future either way. Now, solar panels. I added this section to the presentation because it is so confusing on what solar panels actually imply for Belgium. If you don't have solar panels, this part of the presentation will not apply to you, but it gives you some context on what it would mean if you were to install them. Definitely recommend that you do because it saves a lot of money, I can attest. But be aware that the method of calculation and everything that comes with it will be different and will add a lot of complication, unfortunately. Yeah, I think this is only the only scenarios where it's complicated that actually applies. I will try to do my best to explain this. If it doesn't ring a bell, if it makes no sense or whatever, just hit me in the comments and I'll try to answer your question as best I can. Now, there are different factors here at play because basically the rules here are set out for the most part by the governments. Now, energy is regulated regionally in Belgium. There also are some federal taxes and stuff, but for the most part, the difference in solar panel comes to the regional level. We're going to discuss Flanders first because it's the most expensive, the most complicated, and pretty much everyone else follows suit or uses the simplified method is basically what it boils down to. Meter type also has a big impact on how the prices are calculated. And then there's the meter registration date, which we'll cover at the end of the section. So we're all familiar with these guys. On the right, you'll see the analog meter that we originally had way back when. And on the left, you'll see the digital meter that the Flemish government is currently trying to install in all our homes in an effort to get a better sense of how the electricity consumption is and to get more control on taxes and everything, basically. Basically, the government is starting to roll out these digital meters on all new houses and is starting to replace them in all old houses. The hope is to replace all of these analog by digital meters by the end of 2027. I can tell you right now that's not going to happen. They don't have the manpower to do that. But in the near future, we are all going to have a digital meter that will be able to give us a very accurate information about what our electricity consumption is like. Now, depending on which type of meter you have in Flanders, it basically determines on how your solar taxes, basically the premiums that you have to pay to the government, are calculated. The main difference between the two systems, the analog has a physical dial, whereas digital, obviously digital. The analog goes backwards and forwards. Forwards if you use energy, backwards if you inject energy, or basically if your solar panels produce more than you actually use. They are registered on the same dial. So the dial goes forwards or backwards. Whereas the digital meter basically registers all aspects of the consumption per 15 minutes. I think even per 5 minutes, but I have to check. I have an analog meter, so I can't really see. Basically, the analog meter gives you basic measurement data, where digital gives you the full measurement data, which means on the analog, you can see, for instance, hey, it went back 300 kilowatt hours, but you don't know the difference. You don't know whether you produced, for instance, 6,000 and used 5,700, or you produced 400 and used 100. It basically boils down to the same thing. Whereas on a digital, you can actually see exactly what happened at one point during the day, which is an amazing improvement. And the consequence of that is that the analog meter is not able to record the injection data, whereas the digital meter actually does. And the injection pricing is basically where the main difference is. This was a new type of pricing that was introduced on the 1st of January in 2021. It's basically a contract between you and your energy supplier, where your supplier pays you for the energy that you injected into the net. Now, this is only possible with digital meters because, as stated earlier, the analog does not have that capability. Now, when it started in January last year, you had a price point of about 2 cents per kilowatt hour, which was basically nothing. Now, currently, because of the high energy prices, the highest price point that we currently see in our database is 49 cents per kilowatt hours. It's different per product, but as you can clearly tell, this is a huge increase in price, pretty much level with the increase of the power that you consume. And because of that, it might actually be more interesting for you as a consumer to have a digital meter than it does if you have a analog meter. For example, in my specific case, I have solar panels, and my injection, or my production, I should say, is about 4,000 kilowatt hours greater than my consumption. Now, because I have an analog meter, that basically means that my consumption goes down to zero, which is good, right? Because I pay less. At the same time, if I would have had a digital meter, I would have gotten paid for that 4,000 kilowatt hours that I injected. That would mean a surplus on my energy bill, which would have made me money instead of saving me money, right? If your analog meter goes below zero, that money is gone. It is never registered. It is never given back to you by the supplier. The supplier has basically no way of knowing how much you injected in the net. So that's where the digital meter might be more interesting for you. Fun fact, you can sign a contract for injection with Luminous, for instance, even if you have a contract for consumption at Inigo. No one does this, but theoretically you could if you really wanted to. So, which is better, depends on the situation. The government will actually prefer you to go digital. Typically, consumers prefer analog. I'm not sure if most people remember the decision of the Belgian courts to cancel the analog meter verdict. I'm not sure how to say this in English. Basically, we were promised 20 years of the terugdraaiende teller in Dutch, I'm sorry, which then got reversed by the Belgian courts. So the government actually tries to push you to go to digital with levies and taxes. One of those is the prosumententarief, the prosumer tariff. Another is solar taxes, which are actually taxes some of the suppliers are actually levying on clients with an analog meter. It's not really sure to me why they're doing this, but pretty much all suppliers do this in some form or another. Mega and Total Energies are just the ones that have been more in the news with this particular thing. Mega in particular charges 15 euros per month per kVA of your, so kilovolt ampere of your transformer. I'm not sure why, but it's an incredible increase of your energy bill. Some suppliers are more sneaky about it. They basically add that to your kilowatt hour price instead of making it a separate pricing category, but they pretty much all do it in one form or another. So be aware that that is happening. You can't really choose which calculation method that you use. The analog meters will be upgraded for free by your net supplier, net distributor, so Fluvius in Flanders, by 2027. That is the goal. Owners of solar panels can refuse an upgrade until 2025. After that, it will be mandatory. Again, make the calculation, go to a comparison website, make the calculation what your situation would be with digital and with analog to get a sense of what, if it makes sense for you to actually accept such a switch or not. If you want to switch sooner, it's possible. What you have to do is call Fluvius on their basic number and basically ask them to come, basically put your name on a priority list, and they'll come to switch your meter for a digital one as soon as they can. This will cost you 80 euros. I've called Fluvius for this, and they cannot give me a waiting time unknown. Okay, they can't even say if it's weeks or months or maybe even a year. They have zero idea. If you have done this, I'm very, very, very interested in knowing the details. So please, if you do, send me a message because I have a couple of questions for you about this particular subject. So how do you choose? How do you know what calculation method you should use? Basically, you go to a calculation website, a calculator like Aanbieders, like Mijn Energie, and you basically fill out the form correctly. If you have solar panels, highlight it. If you have a digital meter, just checkbox it. This is the situation on our website because I'm the most familiar with that one. And the calculation engine will basically do the rest for you. Don't worry about it. Just fill out the formula and you'll get the appropriate calculation method in front of you. There's no choice involved. It's just the way it is depending on your situation. So that is the easiest way for you to go about it. Now, last part that I'll say about this, and then Sebastian can give his 2 cents. The month of recording is important. Now, what do I mean by that? If you have a electricity and gas connection in Belgium, or at least in Flanders, correct me, people from other regions, if this is also the case. But once every year, you have to give your meter indexes, basically the meterstand in Flemish, basically the amount that is readable on your meter number. Basically, the distributors use that information to communicate with the suppliers, and the suppliers use that information to calculate how much you have to pay. 1 year, you have to do this yourself. You get a letter like this in your mailbox. This is an older one, but you have to fill it out yourself and submit it online. Another year, the year after that, somebody will actually come to your door and do the registration themselves. That's basically the way Fluvius has decided to work on this. Now, why does this matter? The month of registration is basically how should I put this? It's an anchor point in the industry, right? If you don't have solar panels, this does not matter. If you have solar panels, this is important. This is a typical year of solar panels, where in the winter, your injection is usually a bit lower, days are shorter, less warm, and your usage is a bit higher because you're more at home and the lights are off, or the sun is down, I mean. If you are in the summer, vice versa, days are longer, days are warmer, so you use less energy and you inject a lot more. Let's say, for example, if you're like myself, the yearly registration point is in October. This differs per community. So every city, every town has a different month in which Fluvius will actually come to your door and ask for the meter numbers. So take a note of when you next time you receive this message. You can also call Fluvius and ask for this information. And take a note, that is the month that you have to switch when you have solar panels. For me, this is October. Now let's give you an example on why this is important. Let's say October to September is actually a normal year for me, right? This is the months between which Fluvius will actually measure my consumption. Let's say, for example, in the kilowatt hour price is 62 cents per kilowatt hour, which is roughly the normal price at this point in time. I have a transformer capacity of 5.2 kilovolt ampere. So that means my prosumer tariff in Belgium would be 5.2 times roughly 83 euros, kind of depends, gives you 431.60. And then the solar tax, this is the example from Mega I gave earlier. Let's say Mega is my supplier, would be 15 euros times 5.2 times 12, so 936 euros. And my monthly advance, the money I pay every month to my supplier, is 120 euros, which theoretically should cover all my expenses, or roughly all my expenses through the year. Now, in a normal year of 12 months, my usage in the above example, that means this example right here, would be 5,850 kilowatt hours. My injection would be 6,100. So that's good. That means my advance is 1,440. And if I calculate the total cost, that would mean the advance, or the total cost, that means the final invoice that I have to pay after those 12 months are completed. That would be the advance that I gave, subtracted from that the usage, and then added to that is additional taxes that you always have to pay. No, my usage is 0 because my injection covers pretty much everything. My taxes are 1,367 euros in total. That means that I get 72 euros back from my supplier because I paid a little bit too much during the year. This is roughly, this would be a good monthly advance, because this is usually what a supplier is aiming for, to charge you roughly the amount of money over a 12-month period that you have to pay. This is what they aim for. Now, let's say I switch too early. So my calculation registration starts in October, but I switch after 8 months instead of after 12. My usage at that point is 4,950, which is about the same, but my injection is 2,850. Why? Because in May, we're leaning on to summer. So we had the bad months from the winter. We didn't have the good months from summer. My advance is only 8 months. And if we make the sum for the final invoice, we see that instead of getting 72 euros back, I have to pay 1,397 euros because I switched too early, because I didn't wait for the good injection months to basically solve my reduce the total consumption that I have on my meter. So that's a big difference. And the supplier is actually totally in the right about this. They charge you exactly the amount of money that you use. It's just a lot more than you could have if you had waited those 4 more months until your injection had been a lot higher. If you look at the other way around, if we switch late, so October until December, 15 months in total, we get 7,100 kilowatt hours usage, 7,200 injection, because we had the summer and then a couple months after that. Total advance is 15 months, so it goes up. And the final tally is 314 euros in our advantage. Basically, we get some more money back, which is always good, but it also means that we paid a lot more than we had to. So the energy companies, they don't mind this because they have a little bit more capital to work with, but I assume that most people are like me and they don't want to pay too much because basically those 300 euros can be spent on a different way on your family instead of giving it to your energy supplier. You'll get it back, obviously, but well, it's better to pay exactly what you owe instead of a lot more. So as you can tell, the first scenario is obviously by far the best. And that's why it's important to change the right month. Now, if you have a digital meter, none of this applies. This is only for analog meters. Why? Because if you have a digital meter, the injection that you, so to speak, missed out on, you basically get it back the next year, right? So the injection is not lost. You just, the next year after that, you'll just get a lot of money back from your supplier. Because the surplus injection is not lost, right, as it is for analog meters. So digital meters, you can basically switch whenever you want, as if you did not have solar panels. For analog meters, it is very important to take this into account when you are contemplating a switch of your supplier. Now, all of this was Flanders. For Wallonia and Brussels, the situation is a bit different. They only have one calculation method for both analog and digital meters, which is capacity, which is the method for the analog meter that I described in Flanders. Wallonia experimented with injection. We added it in October last year to the calculation engine on the 1st of October, and 3 days later, we got a notification from the government to roll it back because they canceled it. Which is another great shitty thing about Belgium. Regulations can change so often that we have to roll with the punches. So any of this stuff is the situation as is. It might change as quickly as tomorrow, and we don't know exactly when. They don't give us a heads up. They don't give us a notification. We just have to follow along with what they do, sadly. So in terms of future, everything I've talked about now was the as-is situation, things we've seen so far. We are going towards a capacity tariff. Basically, what it means is they're going to, for solar panels, it's still for solar panels, they're going to calculate a new way to basically replace the presumer tariff with a new way of calculating the taxes that you have to pay based on the peaks in your consumption. So this is a regular day, how most people's day works, I imagine. You sleep at night, you get up at 8 or 7, which means you have a small peak when you make coffee, turn on the lights to shower and everything. Then you go to work, so usage goes down a bit. Then when you come back home, kids come home, computer goes on, TV goes on, God knows what else. Then you usually have your high peak at that point. The highest peak during the day, that is the point where they will zoom in, and that is the point that they will use to do some sort of calculation to determine the amount of taxes you have to pay every month for your solar panels as a replacement for the presumer tariff. Now, the aim here is to motivate you as a consumer to basically flatten the curve. Never thought I'd be using that one again. Basically, what they are aiming for is to incentivize you to use a lot of your high consumption appliances during the day, so that the peaks when a lot of production is needed are lower, which would make it easier for us to scale down the amount of production that we have, because we would be less reliant on gas for the production of our energy. So the system, in a sense, it does make sense, right? It is a good system. It just is very unclear how exactly they are going to do this. This new system is supposed to start working in January of next year. And I can tell you right now, we have zero idea how this is all going to work. We have zero idea how these peaks are calculated. They cannot calculate these peaks with an analog meter. That is problem number one. We guess they have some sort of estimation based on the average usage, but we have no idea. Even for digital meters, as far as we know, there are no calculation methods out there. There is no information on what exactly is supposed to be used. You as a consumer, theoretically, if you want to make a calculation, an accurate calculation on what your pricing will be for the next year, you would have to know this peak. You would have to be able to fill this peak out on our websites for us to tell you how much you'd have to pay. Nobody is going to be able to do that, sadly enough. So this is just a huge black zone, and we fully expect that the government will actually say, nope, we're not doing this right now. We're postponing it for another 6 months or another year. But at this point, your guess is as good as mine. We have no idea what is going to happen. After that, they're probably going to switch to zonal tariffs. This is for 2025 at the earliest, by our estimation. Again, not set in stone, all very variable. Currently, I think most people, have a day and night meter. So basically between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m., you have a different rate, different tariff, the day rate versus the night rate, which you'd have between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. That is the current situation that a lot of people are in. What they're thinking of is switching it up a bit more, where you have a night tariff, you have a morning tariff, a day tariff, and an evening tariff. Or a zone, I should say, with each zone having a different tariff, and then probably another one for weekends and bank holidays and so forth. Again, another way of trying to incentivize you to decrease the amount of peaks that you have in these high price zones. So to, for instance, program your washing machine to run at noon, your dryer to program it to run at 2 p.m., sorry. Just to make sure that we don't all consume too much energy at the same time, which would make it very hard for our production capability to follow along. That is the overall idea. But again, just one of the different ways that the government is trying to make sure that we don't use too much energy. All of these details are purely speculative. We've gotten fractions of information from the industry, but we don't know exactly what is going on, and we don't know exactly when this is going to happen. I'm just giving the information that I have to give you some sense of what is going on and how this market actually works. The most frustrating part here is that it fluctuates so often, and we don't have any control about it. But there's literally nothing we can do about this than just to follow along. So that was it for my presentation.